Keep myself out of the way there. All right. Good day, everybody. This is Jason Straight with the Pass Cloud Virtual Group. Our presenter today is Melody, and she's going to be doing the presentation Introduction to Azure AI, the Art of the Possible. Before we get started here, I'm just going to go through a couple announcements and then hand things off. So the first, there we go. The first announcement is we do have quite a few sessions coming up over the next few weeks. Basically every Tuesday, Thursday, except for one of the Thursdays that I'm on vacation, we have a session going for this virtual group. So if you are looking for things to learn more about, there's plenty of opportunities coming up. The items that are in orange on the screen there are all in orange because those are things that have been added in the last 2 weeks. So you may have missed those, so I encourage you to go out and take a look. If you are interested in presenting, the calendar goes on beyond September 12th, so we are looking for more presenters. I do have a few more that I'm working on scheduling, but if you are interested in presenting, just reach out at cloud@pass.org. Alternatively, we do have a form that you can fill out at the cloud.pass.org website. You just go out there, fill that out, and we'll get you scheduled. Coming this fall is Pass Summit 2019. At the Pass Summit, there's lots of opportunities to learn. One of the ways is through the new learning pathways that'll take you from introductory to advanced topics. And actually, if you look at the one that's on the screen there, Melody will be doing the Intro to AI for everyone at Pass Summit. So this is a little bit of an opportunity to get familiar with Melody's presentation style. If you are interested in learning pathways, you can go out to the Pass Summit website and go to Learning Pathways. If you have not registered yet for Pass Summit, there is a discount code that you can use to get yourself $150 off of your registration fee. You can use our Cloud Pass virtual group code there that's on the screen, and then get that discount. There are a number of virtual groups that are part of the Pass organizations, lots of opportunity to learn either in other languages through like Global Chinese or through different skill sets like data science and performance. So if you are looking for other opportunities to learn, lots of opportunity there. Throughout the session, you may have some questions. If you do, please type them into the Q&A bar, and once in, we will ask them at the end of the session. And with that, I'm going to hand things off to Melody, and with her session today, Introduction to Azure AI, the Art of the Possible. All right, let me make you presenter. There you go.
Excellent. Can you hear me okay, Jason?
I can hear you great, and everything is coming through. So I'm going to mute myself.
Perfect. Okay, thanks. Well, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, depending on where you happen to be in the world today. I appreciate you joining me for this session, Introduction to Azure AI, the Art of the Possible. A couple of things about the title itself is this is definitely an introduction class. This is not something that where you need to know data science for or anything else. I've found when doing this presentation, when talking to people about AI, there's just a lot of misunderstanding about sometimes even what AI is or what is possible with it. And I find that regardless of what your career path is or where you are in your career, whether you're a DBA or a sysadmin or something in between or a crossover or an accidental DBA, it's really good to know what's possible for your company because as technology leaders, particularly in the data space, it's us that our organizations come to help them move forward with their data journey. And knowing what's possible is an important part of that. So this session is set up such that you can find out what kinds of things are possible and then leapfrog your way into your learning, whatever that happens to be. Jason mentioned my session at Pass Summit coming up in the fall, and the introduction session there will be similar to this, but it's more specific on the basics and the groundwork that you'll need to know. So it almost builds on this session to a certain degree. So something to keep in mind if you're going to be at Pass Summit this year. So who am I? I'm a partner at a company called ClearSight Solutions, and we do everything from data warehousing to AI. I'm an MVP for the data platform. Actually, I haven't updated this slide, so as of July 1st, I'm a 4-time MVP. When I started my MVP journey, I was Rookie of the Year. I've written a number of books. Actually, I'm actually missing a book on there. There's three books from the Let Her Finish series, and then this fall coming out with the launch sometime this fall or early winter, I'm hoping, SQL Server 2019. So helping out with that book as well, and I'm highly active within PASS as a regional mentor for Canada since 2014. So the other things I want to bring your attention to are my LinkedIn and my Twitter. If we don't get a chance to answer all of your questions today, if you have additional questions, more in-depth questions, want to know about things that are not directly related to this session, I am happy to chat with people at any time. So just reach out to me either on Twitter or LinkedIn. I check those somewhat regularly, at least, so happy to chat about that. So before we can talk about what is the art of the possible, it's good to baseline things, understand where it all began, and then know the direction that things are going and why. We're going to talk a little bit about why AI is important, how it gets integrated, and where it's going to go from here. So that's our agenda for today. Where did it all begin? This is The Terminator, one of my favorite all-time movies from years past, and I use that to talk about where it all began, because so many people still think, and not just my grandmother, my aunts and my uncles, but so many people still think that AI means the machines are going to take over the world. And that is, in a lot of cases, particularly from a philosophical point of view, something that we need to concern ourselves with and look at, but that's not what this session is about. This session is more about accessibility and inclusion. And that's a very big step from one to the other. So I just wanted to make sure that we are focusing on what is important now within AI and what we're going to focus on in this session in particular. So SQL Server, as most of you, I'm assuming, are data professionals, SQL Server has been around for a very long time. And more recently, what's happened in this space is we've changed from talking about SQL Server to a data platform because there are so many additional pieces to it. We did go from strictly on-prem back in the year when I started my career to private cloud, hybrid cloud, public cloud, big data, Databricks. There are all sorts of additional things now going on in that space. So it's important to remember how far we've come and understand what all of those different things are that are influencing where we're going, not just within AI, but within data itself. And this AI piece is just one part of it. It used to be in 2017. This is a very old picture from Microsoft back in the day when they first started talking about Cortana and the Cortana Intelligence Suite, and things were very confusing for people because they didn't know the difference between Cortana, that was your search engine on your Windows 10 machine, versus Cortana Intelligence, which was the initial processing of applications and sensors and bots. And so that sort of verbiage and wording has completely changed, but those concepts still laid the framework and the groundwork for what came after that. When I first started teaching this session back in 2017, so this, if you haven't seen me before, this is a fairly old picture of me, but a picture of me nonetheless. And I was playing around with these bots, which were set up to get people, I think, not just comfortable with talking to what a bot was, but also it was the beginning of the learning. So if you're familiar with the concept of AI, it comes with the ability to learn or improve. And one of the ways that Microsoft did this is within Skype, they had a number of bots. And this one in particular was called Your Face. And what it allowed was the opportunity for you to give a picture to Skype, and it would analyze that picture and come back and say something. Now, at the time of this, 2017, I was somewhere around that age. So, you know, a 44-year-old woman with a ridiculous smile and who is visually impaired. It was fun to play with because Murphy here was a bit of a snarky old man, I guess, for lack of a better explanation, but it was very humorous. And so it was fun to play with when I was teaching kids about AI and some of the things that were happening with AI. They just loved playing with this concept. And the nice thing about that is it gave us a learning opportunity, an opportunity obviously for Microsoft to get an awful lot of data for them to improve the algorithms that were used for this type of process. And it introduced areas of people who were not necessarily comfortable so much with the tech of it. So it was very easy to use. All you had to be able to do was upload a photo to Skype, which most people were able to do. Then to move beyond that, as Murphy got better, he was able to do additional things. Now, this is a photo of me taken at the Wax Museum in London when I was there on vacation with my kids. And I was super excited about this photo that you see on the slide because it was the opportunity for me to sort of have a photo with one of my role models. I was excited about, you know, standing next to Captain Picard, even though it was a wax. I was still pretty excited about it, and I was all excited about taking this photo and blowing it up and putting it on the wall in my office because that's what geeks do, right? But then I thought, oh, well, wouldn't it be fun, since it was around that same time, I was starting to play with these bots to see how they could be used and how my clients could leverage them, when all of a sudden, so I decided to run it through this program just to see what kind of comments it would come back. I wanted to see, first of all, would it recognize Captain Picard? Would it recognize him as his persona or his real name, or what it would say about it, that type of thing. And the first thing that happened was it noticed 3 people. Now, when you've probably already read through the comments that it made about what was in the photo, but what it made me realize was that I had looked at this photo on my phone, on my computer, on a really large screen. I have a 41-inch monitor that I had looked at this photo on. I had showed it to friends, family, of course, as it was a vacation photo from Europe. I had never been to Europe before. It was a big deal. So showed the photo to a lot of people. And then after I ran it through this program, noticed there was a 3rd person. We had totally been photobombed, and I didn't realize it. So needless to say, it completely ruined the photo for me. This is the only place you will ever see the photo because I did not blow it up. I did not put it on the wall in my office. I was sad. But what I got out of that process and that experience was learning. It reminded me that, yes, computers do see so much more than we do. So that learning was huge. And then I went back to a lot of people who had already seen this photo, and I asked them to look at it again. And I said, well, you know, what do you see? And I had them describe it. And not one of them, not a single person had seen the person in the background who had photobombed it. There is just something about how our brain recognizes images. You see what you want to see, and it brings your attention, once you notice it, to that bias that we have, and the bias that we can have, not just looking at photos, but when we look at our data. And that was a great reminder of why AI can be so important and how it can enhance our learning. So beyond Murphy and his bot, the process continued to get better. And as I often used this example, I continually went back and looked at how the bot had improved. As I did this demo for other people, I would go back and regularly check it with different nuanced photos that I thought would be interesting. And eventually, Murphy did start to, on many occasions, not necessarily all occasions, but on many occasions, determine that the actor in the photo was Captain Picard. And he was always referenced by his character name and not by his real name. And I'm not entirely sure why that is, or if it was part of the programming for privacy reasons and things like that, but it always came back in that format as his character name. Including once I had put through a photo of the Hulk, and it actually recognized the Hulk as the Hulk. It could be just volume of data or information at that point. I'm not that knowledgeable of the particulars behind the algorithm that they used for this, but interesting nonetheless. So then that took us to 2019, where we're now starting to see additional things that these bots can be used for. They're now starting to go from just being interesting to being leveraged for work purposes. So this is just an example of one of the potential architectures that is recommended by Microsoft as an informational bot to answer questions in a knowledge setting, or an FAQ. So you can use Cognitive Services Q&A Maker to answer sort of open-ended-ish questions using Azure Search. And it basically uses conversation as a platform to offer customers using this bot framework how to answer questions without using necessarily a human. So the opportunity to actually start replacing some human interactions with bots. And if you look at the research that's being done and the way these bots are being designed, Microsoft is quite specific about being cognizant of the use of these types of bots. And as I mentioned, we're not going to get into that frame of it, but the idea behind this is to replace the repetitive tasks that are either tedious or I would almost have to say boring to the average person, and allow machines to replace that, or computers to replace those processes. Those are the things that humans will inevitably eventually make mistakes at because of the repetitiveness and the ability for us to get bored. Whereas computers never seem to get bored. They will continually do the same repetitive task over and over. I mean, we go back to our calculators as kids that we used in school, and you could put in 6 times 7 as many times as you want, and you always got the right answer. It never got bored. It never gave you the wrong answer because it was just bored and wanted to see what you would do, or for whatever reason. So these are the types of tasks that the AI of today, not the Terminator type AI, but the AI of today with our bots and such, that we can actually start to leverage for our companies and our customers. And I think that's important. So what's then the new direction? Commerce, the commerce bot scenario is a bot that replaces the traditional email or phone call interaction that people typically have, say with a hotel concierge service, or a bot that takes advantage of cognitive services to process customer requests via text message or voice with context that it gathered from the integration with a back-end type of a service. So those are quite helpful. In the commerce bot scenario, a customer can make a request for concierge services with a hotel. It's authenticated via Azure Active Directory, and an authentication point. So the bot can look up customer reservations. It can provide different service options. So say for example, you want to ask for an additional pillow, you can do that. The bot understands language to a certain degree. It uses the Lewis to paraphrase and understand requests and allows the bot to walk a user through a process of asking for that pillow or whatever additional service it is that you're looking to do. The Cortana skill bots have scenarios that take advantage of Cortana using natural interfaces of your voice, and a custom Cortana skill bot can ask Cortana to speak to an organization such as a mobile auto detailing company, or make an appointment when you're on a call with them. The bot can also list the services that are available and the times or durations that they're available, whether it's for auto detailing or say you want to book a massage. Massage therapy clinics here in Canada, typically the massage therapist is a therapist as well as a receptionist. In cases like that, they can have this bot allow them to answer calls and walk clients through available spaces for when times are available, and they can book their appointment, and that doesn't interrupt the therapist from the client that they're currently with, but still not having to make all of that time-consuming phone calls back because they were busy with clients. So it can be quite helpful. Within the enterprise productivity scenario, there's integration now with Office Calendar, Office 365, and other services, which I'll show you in the demo. The bot integrates very nicely with Office 365 to make it quicker and easier to create meeting requests with another person. There's integrations as well with the Dynamics CRM, which can be quite useful and provide code necessary to integrate for authentication as well, so that you can have some background research done or other access to sensitive information as needed. The informational bot can answer questions defined in a knowledge set or FAQ, which we had talked about before, using Cognitive Services Q&A Maker. This is a common one that's done for FAQs that are on websites and such. It's often information that is buried or data that is stored in a SQL Server that can be used and searched. Obviously, along with that Azure Active Directory integration, and it gives you the idea that you can, or the concept of being able to, for customers to check order statuses by simply using voice commands, and it allows Cognitive Services Q&A Maker the user to present it with a set of values for search options, like looking up a customer or reviewing a customer's needs, what their most recent order is, or ask questions that are investigated using Azure Search, whether that's stored in a database or in a readable document. Then the Internet of Things bots are making things easier for you to control devices around your home as well, such as lights, for example, and I'll show you a quick demo of that in a few minutes. Using this simple bot, you can control certain lights within your home with the free service if this then that service. Lights can be controlled and exposed via an API as well. However, this API is not exposed for general access from the outside the local network, so it's all within the confines of your local network. So I'm going to give you a couple of demos to start us off here. So just bear with me for a moment. I'm going to end the slideshow so that I can switch over to show you the lights. So this is Lewis and the light demo. So because this is a presentation and I'm speaking to you and I don't want it to get confused, it's much easier for me to either type the text or choose an option. But you can see from this classic house look where there's a number of different options. So within your office say you're in your office working and the lights are too dark and it's too dark to work in here. So if I click on that, it lightens the room where I'm working in the office. Or if I'm in the kitchen and I need more light to cut my carrots, you can see that the statement itself is very natural. It's not, hey Siri, turn up the lights in the kitchen. It's, I need more light to cut carrots. It's more natural in how you would speak. So that's just an example of how far the algorithms and the AI have come to allow us to be more natural, not only in our working environment, but in how we interact with our AI. So if I click on that one, it will increase the light within the kitchen. Or if I can't find the remote when in the living room, I can click on that and it'll allow me to a little more light to find the remote. If I go to energy saver mode, it will dim lights, make everything quite a bit darker. And then if I need, if I'm expecting guests, it will turn on the outside light. So that's probably the best example of the opportunity for it to understand the difference between an actual command and natural speech patterns. And then, of course, just for fun, I love that they do this, is you always have to have something fun to do. So you can call for Batman, and after Batman arrives, you've got mission accomplished, and you can turn Batman off. But Batman is always fun to call. Even if you have no other reason to go to this page, then it's like, yeah, it's time to call Batman. So here's the link up here for that. If you want to go and play with that, or if there's other people that you want to show, that type of thing, that's the link for it here at the top. And then I'm going to move on to another demo. So one of the things that I'm going to do with this next demo is talk about translation. Translation can be used not only for doing English to another language, but the demo I'm going to give you is a translator within PowerPoint itself. And the nice thing about this for speakers or conferences or even within organizations, I find it very handy. So I am Canadian and I do a fair amount of work for the federal government. Canada is a dual language country. We have English and French. So if I'm giving presentations to my clients, I always give them the opportunity, because I only speak English, I give my clients the opportunity to have subtitles of French when I do all of my presentations. Most everybody who works for the federal government who are employees speak both languages, but for some, French is their more dominant language, and it's more comfortable for them to listen to it, particularly if they find my accent, my Canadian English accent, to be quite heavy. Even if you don't necessarily need that translation to understand completely, it sometimes can fill in the gaps if somebody has a heavy accent. So for some people from Quebec, my native English Canadian accent is quite heavy, making it difficult for me to be understood, particularly if I speak quickly. or if I'm talking about concepts that they're not familiar with, it's just nice to have that additional backup. So what I'm going to demonstrate today is translation within PowerPoint. And we'll talk about that a little bit, but I wanted to show you this website in case you wanted to, as we go through this demo, follow along. So you can follow along either on this website. Every time I do a presentation, it will give me a unique code that's valid for that presentation. And you can also do this on your iPhone or Android device as well. There is an app that you can download. So I just wanted to make you aware of that on the website in case you wanted to follow along as we go through this. So I'm just going to switch over to my other presentation, sorry, which is actually my demo. So within PowerPoint, this is my base PowerPoint presentation. So if I were doing a regular PowerPoint presentation, I would create my presentation. Before I go to present it, I would start my subtitles. What this does is brings up the opportunity to choose what language I will be speaking and what language I want the subtitles to be in. Because this is English to English, or I'm going to present it in English to English, which is why I gave you the opportunity to do it yourselves on the website if you want a different language. But this will give you a sense of how the algorithm works. What accuracy do we have? I've given this presentation a number of times, and I have had people follow along or reference or check in all of the common languages for sure, and then in Hindu and Russian and Portuguese and Dutch and German, I think, are the least common ones that I've done. But even those, I was told from native speakers, are very, very good. So what I've done here is just set this up to use, I think I'll use my headset because I switched to my headset. So what I'm going to do is set this up to recognize what I say from English to English, just so you can see how good the translation is. So this will take a few minutes for it to go through and create those subtitles and get started. So always it'll come up with this initial screen, which is the translation screen. So now you can see, because we went through it and did it again, I changed my input. It has automatically changed the, let me just get my pointer. So you can see here where it has changed the code. If you scan within the app, if you scan this QR code, it'll come up automatically. Or this here will give you the website where you can go to and change the language that you want to use. The subtitles I have set up to come up at the top. So that's where we're seeing them, is at the top. You can also set them to come at the bottom. It works for both. So Microsoft Translator is basically machine learning in everyday use. In behind the scenes, this is using machine learning to translate things. You can see it's very quick. Even though I'm running this PowerPoint presentation from my laptop, it is obviously going to the cloud to do the translation itself and bringing it back. The key features include audience participation. This feature allows audiences to participate by asking questions in their own language. So as part of this API, it has the ability to get real-time speech and translate it back. So I've demonstrated this where I've had audience members ask questions in varying languages, and it will give me the translation on the screen in English. So I can, so an audience member can ask me in Spanish or Russian a question, and it will allow me to see it on the screen, and I can respond to that question in English, and it will translate it to them on their app or on the website, depending on which process they're using. It uses custom speech, translation of text, and a mic to get all of this done. But really what it allows is accessibility. And that accessibility is not just for different languages, but can be for people who have difficulty hearing even. So it's not necessarily just the native uses of translation that this has become so useful for, but for people who have difficulty hearing, difficulty understanding, or even difficulty reading. If you're giving a presentation and people can't necessarily read that translation and they still want to hear it, they can listen to it. Or people who are visually impaired can listen to a presentation without necessarily hearing it all, seeing it all that well as well. So somebody could read slides to them if it wasn't a formal presentation. So there's a lot of additional uses for this that can be utilized on top of just using it for a formal presentation. Once we start to think outside the box for some of these things, there's an awful lot of uses. So as I had mentioned, the QR code, it's generally just a 5-letter QR code. Within the app, it also allows you to just have conversations or use the app as an actual translator. Say you're traveling and you want to translate something or ask somebody a question as you're traveling. Right within your phone, you can actually do that. Outside of PowerPoint, the app can be used as a natural translator. It does 10 spoken languages, so it will translate into, or you can listen to it speak to you in these 10 languages that I have up. We have tested the Arabic, and it is, I am told, quite good. They also allow up to 60 text languages, including, I think, Sanskrit, which is not a common one. So languages also that have non-standard character sets as well. So the nice thing about the custom speech that it uses is it allows you to review things like technical terms. And the more often you do a presentation or you test with this AI, it will improve as well. When I first started doing this, it didn't recognize SQL Server, and on occasion it still doesn't. But more often than not, as you see on the screen, it says SQL space server. Before, it used to spell it out as in a sequel to a movie. So here it's getting the right context. That gives you an idea of how far it's come in even the last 8 months, I would say. It's improved in a lot of ways. The more people use this, the more it'll improve and the better it'll get. That learning is very handy for things like products or things that are custom to a particular industry. SQL is the most common for us because the difference between SQL Server and Toy Story 4 are very different, and those mean a lot to us. So that context is important when it's doing its learning. The fact that it's gotten that far now is a testament, I think, to how useful this product is starting to become and how much more people are using it themselves. The 60 text languages are phenomenal for business. It is a world economy that we live in now, and it it allows us to speed our processes, I think, in not necessarily having to have somebody translate it or to go to something like, I still remember I used to go to Google Translate to translate things. My company, we have employees worldwide, and on occasion I will get an email in a different language. Not very often, but on occasion I'll get an email in a different language, and it's very nice to just be able to translate it immediately without having to go back to that employee and say, can you send that back to me in English, or can you have somebody translate it, or have to translate it myself? And it does both left to right and right to left languages for this text translation, which can be very handy as well. Oh, sorry, it does. It is nice in that it allows for audience questions. That's handy if you're using it that way. It also allows you to have a natural conversation. If it is not used for necessarily a presentation, but a learning experience. So if you're teaching somebody and English isn't their first language, you can use that just for a natural flow of conversation back and forth, even if it's not technically a question. It's great for inclusivity. It helps audience members who are deaf or hard of hearing to follow the presentation and participate in the discussion as well. So there's a little bit more on issues with it. I have not recently found any issues. This stems back from a couple of years ago when I first started using it, where there was issues with the translator or to be able to give feedback. It has improved substantially since then. So that I find that as that very useful, but let me show you a couple of other things here as well. Just going to close this down. Let's go back to our regular presentation. Jump back to where we were. We're at our demo. So what I wanted to show you on here, before we move on to some other items, is this Microsoft Translate. So I don't know how many of you are using Office 365 right now, but not only is it in our PowerPoint presentations that it's available, but it's also available directly within our Office 365. So if you're using Office 365, you may have to have an administrator turn this on for you, but it is available within Office 365 to translate emails directly within Outlook. It's available within Excel. I have to admit, I have not found that overly useful myself. I haven't used it too often within Excel just because of the nature of Excel. In my Excel spreadsheets, I find have a lot more numbers and data than actual text. But in Word, it's been hugely helpful. What I forgot to mention when going through the PowerPoint deck was it will also translate each of my slides. So when I give slide decks to my client, the federal government, I will give them 2 slide decks always, one in English and one in French, because those are our 2 official languages. So when I present my clients with decks, I'll do it in both official languages. So translating that in PowerPoint is very helpful. And for the government now has Office 365 in most of their locations, but for any offices that need any documents that I do or proposals that I do in 2 languages, I can translate those documents directly within Word and save them without having to go to a different third-party product or have to worry about changing formatting as much. in that sense, I can change it directly within the products that I'm using. It is unbelievably simple and convenient if you ever need multiple languages. So that's quite handy. So we've talked about the uses, but why is AI important? Some people think that it's to replace jobs or to do things like that. And I think that the importance of AI is for the inclusivity, for the reach, for communication. Some of the most important things that we do with data is around communicating. We use data to communicate our points, whether that's a visual or verbal or written. It's a lot of what we do with data is around communication. So being able to do that in multiple different ways with multiple different services, I find that AI integrates quite nicely with that to allow us to do that communication aspect. So a big part of data is communication. So it's important to use AI for good, obviously, and I think making things more inclusive is just one of those ways. But what's at the basis of all of that we do with these bots and information, going back to why do we do AI and why is it important? It's important because it does things in a lot of ways better than us, and I think I demonstrated that with the bots or with the translation. AI can do things that humans can't do as quickly. So it's not necessarily, we're not necessarily at the stage where AI can replace humans, but we're certainly at the stage where AI can help humans do things faster and more reliably. Some of the questions that AI answers for us are these yes-no questions. It's not that we can't make those decisions, but as we know, computers can do things much quicker than we can. Finding things that stand out, finding things that are odd, finding that third person in a photo that I didn't see. Those kind of oddities are very useful. Quickly determining amounts of things, or taking those and grouping them into organizations and finding similarities between things. Something that as humans we are naturally very good at, but not necessarily very quick at. And then that predictive now what? The predictive analytics are very useful because computers can do so many iterations and checking of different things to do them so much quicker than we can. So it might surprise you, but these really are the 5 questions that data science answers. Each one is answered by a separate family of machine learning methods called algorithms, and that's as technical as I'm going to get for this session. But just to give you the idea of that, and I'll talk more about that in my session at Task Summit, getting more into what those different processes are. But why we do AI, just to give you a better idea of that, if you've not heard of something called a heuristic, it's really an important piece to this. And it kind of explains to a certain degree, along with bias, why machine learning can be better at answering some questions than humans are. And the reason is it does this process much quicker than we do, because as humans we take shortcuts, and that's essentially what a heuristic is. It allows you to find the right answer because it feels right, but you're not exactly positive it's right unless you go through an entire analysis process of what is the right question. Let's form a plan around that. Let's do some research around that. Let's organize that data. Let's think about that and let's draw a conclusion. It's not unlike a project management process that you might do for work. But to get out of bed, brush your teeth, have your coffee, get dressed, and go to work in the morning, you don't want to have to do that for every little thing you do. We sometimes get into a process of taking these shortcuts so that we can speed along our life, right? when it comes to analyzing data, we sometimes make those leaps and make those judgment calls, and we call it experience. However, it's not always necessarily right. And that's where mistakes happen. So if we allow AI to do these repetitive tasks for us, we're less likely to make mistakes. And the answer to that is happy customers. The less often we have issues or make mistakes within our workday or our employees within our company, as we make less mistakes, we end up with happier customers. So what are some of these cognitive services we can leverage to make our customers happy? There is speech, which is whether it's translation or acknowledgement. Search, which we had talked about earlier, about some of the bots using search to find different solutions or answer questions. We have vision, knowledge, and language. These cognitive services leverage machine learning so that you can leverage pre-built algorithms with APIs to harness the opportunities so that you don't necessarily have to be a data scientist to take advantage of some of these things. Speech allows you to convert the spoken or audio into text and use voice for verification, or add speaker recognition to an app, for example. Search, you can add Bing search APIs to your to harness the ability to comb billions of web pages or images or news with a single API call. Vision and image processing algorithms allow you to identify, caption, and moderate pictures. Knowledge, map complex information and data in a way to order or solve tasks and recommendations. And language allows your apps that natural language processing scripts that are leveraged within the PowerPoint presentation that I was showing you. And it allows you to give the users what they need. So there's lots of different ways to integrate it. We talked about the APIs and other processes. The one thing I do want to make sure that I mention before we get to some of the questions is that now all of these can be done in containers. One of the things that was holding back a lot of my clients in the early stages of this process, they loved them, they found them very useful, but they had data that they didn't want to or couldn't move to the cloud, and they didn't want to have those processes running directly in Azure. So one of the things that was holding them back was the fact that they didn't want to move their data. Now that you can run this in containers, there are certain things that are cloud only. However, you can see on the right, there's a number that you can run in containers, and those can be downloaded so that there is a piece that you access. You keep your data and your APIs on premise, and the API itself will make a call only that goes up to the cloud, does what it needs, and sends the information back. None of your data actually leaves your organization or your on-prem cloud or servers that you're using to do this process. So if security or moving data to the cloud is of concern for you, there are still some things that you can do, and I expect that this list, because it is very new, I expect this list to grow. So this is new for 2019. Face recognition, recognizing text, and some of the analytics can all be done on-premise now as well. So it gives you the opportunity to leverage some of these items, build APIs within your own workloads, or leverage some of these services, not only without putting your data in the cloud, but also without having to write any actual algorithms yourself. So a lot of these algorithms are written. You can leverage herd data for lack of a better explanation for how this is done, but essentially these services that are provided by Microsoft are learning all the time by all the people who are using it, and then you can leverage that. So the fact that the PowerPoint presentation service has now learned, that translation service has learned that SQL and a movie SQL are different, you can leverage that without having to start from scratch and run billions and billions of pieces of data through your algorithm to get it up to the recognition and learning that it's done that this particular Microsoft item has. One of the questions I often get about that is what is the cost for that? And it's when you're running it on-prem, it's based on what the cost is of however many calls, and that's something that you can look into. There's there's tiers basically if you want to do X number of calls per month or X number of calls per year, or however they're costing that out, but it's quite inexpensive. The PowerPoint, the Word, and Excel and Outlook translation features don't cost anything. It's part of your Office 365. So you're not paying anything extra for that. But if you want to start putting these APIs into your own services, the cost is fairly inexpensive depending on the volume of use. And that changes over time and can be negotiated with Microsoft, is my understanding. So very handy now that you can do it in containers on premise. And I'm sorry, but that leaves me quick 2 minutes for questions. Sorry, Jason, I tried to get through it as quickly as possible.
Oh, no problem at all. We do have a number of questions, and so let's just see what we can get through here and go from there. So the first question we have is, what's the best way to start playing and learning these new technologies cheaply, as this attendee is doing it personally for themselves?
I would start with what interests you the most, that you think would be useful for you, and play around with the technology first. And then depending on your skill set, whether you're a developer and you want to integrate an API into something that you do or have done, is probably the easiest way. Or if you want to get more into the machine learning, then understanding how these processes happen and start learning on that side. So it really depends on what area that you want to specialize in and what your background is, what interests you. But always, always start with what's most interesting to you.
Okay. And then how up-to-date are the idioms in various languages? How well does it correct spelling while retaining meaning?
That depends on the language and how often it's been used. I would say obviously English is quite good, but I have been told that other languages are good, but sometimes very literal. So that goes back to the more you use it, the better it gets. The more we use it, the better it'll get, and it varies based on the languages. So definitely English is exceptional. I understand Spanish, French, Dutch, German. The more spoken languages are exceptional, but some of the less used, and actually I'm told Arabic is quite good. I'm not sure why. I didn't realize it was that common of a language, but I think it depends on how common it is and how often it's used.
Okay. And I think the next question actually ties into what you just answered, is, what is the accuracy of the translator? That's
yeah, and I'm told it's very, very literal. And with something like Hindu, I was told that it was not a common language, but far more formal. The translation itself was far more formal, which makes sense because it's a learning process, I guess, that they would do it more formal before they're comfortable with taking slang, I guess.
Right. And how capable is it in recognizing speaker bias, especially when the speaker is not aware of the bias?
I think it would depend on what the bias is and what type of bias it is. So I'm not, I think I would need an example to understand the question fully.
Okay. And then we've got a few others here, and I'll just get these over to you. So if you want to answer them in the blog post or similar. And then, as you mentioned earlier, if people want to connect with you on LinkedIn, you're willing to answer some of these questions as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Or Twitter. DM me.
Or Twitter. Yep.
Yep.
The last one that I think we have time to ask is, where will the quantum ML lead to?
Wow, that's a very open, big, and open-ended question. I don't even know. To wonderful and great things, I hope.
Right. All right. Well, we are out of time for today. Thank you, everyone who attended. Thank you, Melody, for presenting here today. And at this point, I'm going to close this out and just remind everyone, in a few days, this will be up on the YouTube channel for Past TV. All right. So thank you again, everyone. Thank you, Melody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.